Is there a right way to narcissistic abuse recovery? And is there any type of relationship that isn't significant enough to emotionally hook us? Today, Tara and I are going to read a listener's letter that talks about this type of situation. We're going to talk about the power of getting emotionally hooked in toxic relationships. And the self-help tip is to replace our painful thoughts and moments with acts of kindness towards ourselves. Thank you for joining us on Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse, where we talk about strategies, tips, and tricks on navigating and recovering from narcissistic abuse. I'm your host, Dr. Kerry McAvoy, a mental health clinician with over 20 years experience and author of Love You More, a graphic inside look at my experience of a toxic relationship.
And I'm your other host, Tara Blair-Ball, certified relationship coach, abuse survivor, and author of Reclaim and Recover, Heal from Toxic Relationships with the 7-Step Guided Journal.
We're thrilled that you're here with us today. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and leave us a review and let us know what you think of the show.
Today, we're going to be doing a slightly different segment and to see whether or not y'all might like it. So if you do, make sure to send us an email, read it, leave a comment on any of our content, and give us a sense of whether you liked this kind of episode or not. But today we are going to be reading a letter from a listener that she shared with us. So let me start by reading that letter, and then Kerry and I will open a dialogue about what we think this listener should do. So the letter starts, "Hi, Kerry and Tara, you are incredible and have an amazing podcast. Thank you. I'm wondering if you could talk about situationships with narcissists and or toxic people on your podcast. I'd greatly appreciate some advice." So here's a scenario, Kerry. I was in a situationship with a guy who I now think is a covert narcissist for 1.5 years. He would be so kind and lovely, coming off as the perfect partner, yet would orbital ghost me. He'd always come back like nothing happened and lay the future faking down hard when I'd pull away, and always used guilt as a currency in a way that would threaten him leaving again if I wouldn't help him or advise him or love him. He made me feel like I'm the bad one for not giving him a chance, and that it was my fault he came and went, and if I'd only given him a chance, he'd love the hell out of me and treat me better, after saying he wanted nothing serious. I'd never know when I'd hear from him, when he suddenly stopped talking, which I now see he used to his advantage. Over time, I figured it out, yet I couldn't walk away because I didn't want to hurt him or cause more distress in his life than what he already had. I finally did, though, gather the strength to leave him, and I deleted his number, but couldn't get myself to block him. It's been over 2 months now, and we haven't talked. He hasn't contacted me at all. We do live in the same city, just on opposite sides, and anytime I drive through his side of the city, I can't help but spiral. The other day, I was at the park close by his house for a birthday party, and I saw him. It felt as though a dagger was twisting in my gut. It was raw and absolutely awful. So I wonder, how long will it be until I can drive through those streets and not feel such pain or think of him? This was just a situationship, not even a committed relationship. Yet my heart hurts still, and I feel like I should be in a better place right now than I am. But I didn't know how to be there and not think about him, or how to heal and forgive myself for the shame and guilt and let go. What do you think, Kerry?
Oh, man, this is a familiar place. And it sounds like to me, there's two things that hit me right off the top. One is strong trauma bond got developed, regardless of whether or not this was romantic or intimate or just a situationship. There was a strong connection, but also that she's really being plagued by a lot of cognitive dissonance. The duality there of this good guy and the bad guy, and she's struggling with knowing what's real, and she tends to lean, like most of us, into the good guy. That's like she said, that whenever they get back together, he would like lean into all this future faking and do all of this kind of creating this really romantic life together, or thought like future life together, that she's still caught in that still is existing as real for her. Yeah, that's what was right off the top of my head. What struck you? What was sort of what leapt out at you most?
What really leapt out at me was the level of pain and guilt, and she mentioned shame, like the comment, like, yet my heart still hurts and I feel like I should be in a better place right now than I am. I think it's so easy to be really hard and tough on ourselves for the fact that we are still bonded. We still have these feelings. And that's really what I related to a lot, is just how much we shame ourselves for the fact that our recovery from whatever doesn't look like what we would hope or want it to be. And it sucks. It really, really sucks. And I can just relate to that a lot. How I was the one to leave my toxic ex, and yet I was the one who felt broken and he seemed fine. Like that was so awful to me. It made it even more devastating because I'm like, he's the one who did that fucked up shit. Why is he feeling fine? Why hasn't karma come back and bite him in the ass? And why am I like on the floor weeping all the time?
Yeah.
So I can relate a lot to that, being hard on ourselves, but I do want to recognize that clearly this is progress, that, deleted the number, didn't reach out, saw him and didn't run over there, talk to him. That I think those are all signs of good progress that someone can do in this situation. And I think it's also relevant to talk about too, that this was just a situationship. These relationships are so impactful and changing that it doesn't matter if it was just a friendship or a coworker or a family member or a romantic partner, that they do have this level of impact on us and they can devastate us and annihilate us regardless of the level of commitment. And I think that's important to just acknowledge too, that they can really devastate us regardless of that. And clearly this had a big impact because of the back and forth and the
other thing that struck me was she said that his primary tool was guilt. And notice what was laced through this letter was lots of guilt, that he is still effectively controlling her by making her feel bad for even feeling bad. I just saw kind of layers of the guilt being piled on, guilty for not do what she thinks doing the right things, which you and I clearly know this healing process is not linear. It's a sometimes definitely a 2-step forward, 1 step back kind of experience, very, very much so. And sometimes you don't even know, you feel like you've taken 5 steps back. It doesn't even feel like you've taken 1 step. It feels like you lost ground. But that's a normal kind of recovery looks like. But also guilt for feeling the way she does, guilt for the way she's exiting. Maybe that's not the right way. But I just hear there's just laced with guilt. So I think it's really interesting. Sometimes when we can stand back from these relationships and look at them at a map level, we can see the way that the person's exploitation of us sets the groundwork for us then to exploit ourselves with that. It's like they set almost like a machinery inside of us going, sort of this way of thinking, and then it just carries forward and continues to activate in ourselves even when we're not aware of it. I know that mine has done some of the ways, that same thing. Some of the sort of this negative, he would have a way of making digs at me about my appearance or my desirability. And if I'm not careful, I can hear myself picking those up and making the same comments to myself. And I have to recognize that and stop that, because it's a continuation of his abuse. He doesn't even need to be here to continue to abuse me, but I have to recognize this nature of this.
Yeah, I agree. I think too that one thing that we need to mention is that thing you talked about is letting someone control or letting someone still have power over us. The fact that this writer of this letter deleted the number but didn't block, that person still has power and control there. Like, you don't have the ability to necessarily reach out to them because you deleted their number, but they potentially can, and you haven't blocked their potential access to you. And so that's one thing that I would suggest for this listener and writer is, how can you take some of your own power back? And part of that is stopping someone from having access to you. Yeah. Like, we aren't going to be able to necessarily control where we see someone or, the memories that we have to a certain place. But we can control someone's access to us. And I will say about the memories piece, that's a super tough one. What has helped me in my recovery process is creating new memories in those specific places, new positive memories. So I remember, like, there was a favorite park that I had that I used to go with an ex a lot, and that park always had really strong memories for me. But it was also a park I had visited and loved before we had even been together. And I really wanted to sort of reclaim it for myself. And I would go sometimes after we separated and just like feel sad in the park, like, because it just was a constant reminder of that. But then I started like taking, I joined like a walking group, and we would take walks around this lake that was at this park. Like, I just created a new memory there. It wasn't all just that relationship. It sort of reclaimed it for myself. And it's also okay to take space from visiting certain places until some of those have passed or have lessened. The duration, frequency, and intensity has lessened. But I do think I think some of the things that might be holding this listener back is the fact that they may still be sort of waiting for that contact, because it could come. And would you be prepared for it if it did?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to let go of the fantasy of what we wish a relationship could be, the potential. We often talk about it in terms of a potential. The potential is actually not there. I mean, if it's not there now, then it's not there at all. And that the idea of it could be there is actually a mirage. It's an illusion. It's not actually real. But we get trapped on that because we see a person's innate good nature and we end up thinking there's hope that this could be more or could be better. And so we leave that door open kind of as proof of that. And I also think sometimes we all have a need to be chosen. That's just hardwired into our nature. I mean, we're wired for belonging. And there's no bigger boon or boost to our ego than to have somebody that we see as not choosing us to then choose us. It really does something powerful for us. And that's, again, not wrong to want that. That's the way we're made. It's innate. But what we can do is to recognize that as not bad, but vulnerable, and then step in and choose ourselves. And you're right. A great way to choose yourself is to block him. It's just to say, you know what, I'm taking this relationship off the table at all levels. I don't want the relationship. That's what's helped me a lot when I see these iffy situations, to ask myself, do I really want somebody who's willing to do this to me? Is that showing myself love and respect to allow somebody to be in this even if it's waffly, in and out, up and down, whatever, but this is clearly abusive. But I'm even saying less abusive. I ask myself, is this really the kind of relationship that I want? Why am I then leaving an opening for that? And just to take it off the table. And that can bring you so much peace, so much peace. It's scary doing it, but once it's done, I feel a lot of relief, incredible relief.
Yeah. I find for myself in my recovery in general that I just really have to pay attention to my actions, and my actions will often tell me things, and in this case, for example, like not blocking the number, deleting it, but not blocking it, is that sort of leaving that door open, and this listener may not actually be able to go back and block because they'd have to have the number in place.
That's true. Maybe gone. Yeah, that's right. You're
right. So, it may be about thinking about how you will respond if and when they do reach out. For me, when that did happen, when I was reached out to in a situation similar to this, I just immediately blocked. I'm like, thank God I have their number. I can block them,
Okay.
I think a couple I responded with like, hey, hope you're well. I'm not interested in continuing anything with you, block, I think, again, it's about remembering that you can take your power back. You can make that choice. And I didn't feel like I could make that choice for a long time because I felt like it wasn't nice or it was mean or whatever. Like, I feel like I have the privilege today of getting to choose what people have access to me.
Yeah.
And that's because I see myself as valuable today. And I didn't for a long time. For a long time, I saw myself as valuable only by what other people thought of me. But I see myself today as valuable in and of myself. And that's taken a lot of work to get there.
Yeah.
And that's, it has helped choosing actions like stopping being selective about the people I allow to have access to me.
This person will reach out. I'm going to tell you, he will reach out again just because he knows he has successfully in the past. He will do it again. May take a while, may be a year or two, but he will reach out again. So I agree. When that happens, be ready for it. Have a plan of action. See that as an opportunity to then not only to delete again, but also to block. But yeah. And I think the other thing that I really heard in this letter that I want to, in fact, it was powerful because I just saw a TikTok on this by Cynthia. She goes by Sinful on TikTok, and I'll make sure I put the link in the bio. But she did this fantastic clip showing what recovery looks like. And at first she's like talking up, celebrating, act like it's really big. And then she's crying in her bed. And then she's, next thing she's doing something really victorious. And then she's drinking, it's this kind of this waffling of I'm good, I'm not good, I'm good, and I'm not good. And I think it's important for us to know that that's what recovery looks like. It is a messy process. You'll be hit by emotional experiences you don't expect. It's often at unexpected times, or things that you thought weren't going to be a problem suddenly are problematic because it triggered some memory that you had or some bad incident that you forgot about. But to be okay, to kind of give ourselves so much leeway, so much grace and space for us to let this be a messy process.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, we get so caught up on thinking there's a right way. I hear that a lot. People will say, is this normal? Yeah, it's normal for you, then it's normal.
Right.
There's not in fact, in psychology, when we would assess a child's behavior, parents would come in and tell me as a therapist about problematic issues. It wasn't that something happened that's the problem. All kids fight. All kids wet the bed. All kids struggle with eating. All kids don't want to go to school. I mean, typical things. And same for adults. We have behaviors that are typical for us. It's not that they show up that's the problem. It's the frequency and the duration that's the problem. If you start to see that as a habitual problem, a habitual issue, then you've got a problem, something that needs to be addressed. But the fact that you have these reactions, that themselves really just say that you're human. That's all that they're saying. They're not saying anything more than that. But we get so kind of caught up in this idea that there's a template, like there's a right way to do things, and that there's just your way. It's not a right way. It's just your way.
Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize that there will always be mess. I know some people who have handled the recovery process in this way that like seemed perfect and so good. And then they start dating and they're a fucking mess. Or they're a fucking mess in the grieving process. I just think it's really an important part of the human experience that we are messy and we're not going to handle it perfectly. And this is a bit of a mess for this listener, and there's some shame around that. That's right. Part of, I always tell clients that you're going to make mistakes, but hopefully there'll be new ones, and that's a sign of progress. And that was a good reminder for me when I was in that own place of like when I would make a mistake. It didn't, just because I left a toxic ex doesn't mean I suddenly became perfect or anything like that. I was still going to make mistakes. They just hopefully are going to be new ones, which means I'm not repeating the same old. And that's the goal here for this listener is, walking yourself through that and keep making different choices, not the same choice.
I love that because that's such a good point. It really, and just because you do something well doesn't mean you're going to do everything well. You're so right. I mean, every person has a place that we kind of like don't fall apart. So I love that, and don't let anyone else shame you around that too. I'm always like, well, you did so well here. Why are you not doing so well there? You know what? It's not your process. Butt out. It's you. It's where you're struggling with. I even find that places in my life, I've had several people close to me die. Each one of them hit me different in different ways in different times. And I've just learned to sort of throw at the idea of that there's a playbook out the window. There's not a playbook to any of this. It's just, I keep asking myself, am I trying to step forward? Am I trying to do what I know works or not? And they use that as a measurement. And some days the answer is yes, some days not so good, and other days absolutely not. But I try to make more of the yes and so days more than the not so good days.
Yeah, I like that. I hope this listener got something from our conversation today.
I do too.
I think it's a good thing to really consider from a lot of different angles. For one, that part of, shaming ourselves because it's just a situationship. I just feel like it doesn't matter. These types of people and these types of relationships, regardless of how long they last, regardless of how much commitment, they're going to have a really lasting impact on us. And this one lasted for 1.5 years. Like, that's not a short amount of time. I had a relationship with someone who's very, I know today was very clearly narcissistic. It literally was only 3 months. It still had a huge impact on me because of how how much it started to affect my self-esteem and feelings of self-worth and the controlling aspects of that relationship. I'm very grateful I left when I did, but it did have an impact on me, especially moving forward. It did.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, these relationships have an ability to get under our skin or into our hearts in a profoundly different way that just makes it super toxic, super impactful. Yeah, I really appreciate this letter. And if you find this helpful, I hope other listeners would consider writing us and presenting different situations. We'd be happy to take that up and do this periodically, because I found this is a lot of fun, and I appreciate the trust. It means a lot to have this listener's trust to ask us this. So thank you for that. Any final kind of like, do you think of a self-help tip or last words of advice for her in this situation?
I would think something I was thinking about with that comment that she made of it was raw and absolutely awful, like a dagger twisting in your gut. I would think a self-help tip might be, what can you do with that pain that would be positive? That's a very internal, like a dagger twisting in your gut. So like, what could you do to take care of yourself instead? What could you can use that pain, but also recognize that you're still someone who deserves love and kindness. So what kind of self-care can you do? So when you're feeling something as awful as a dagger twisting in your gut, a lot of us tend to sort of neglect ourselves in that process because we feel like a piece of shit, like we don't eat, we don't sleep, we don't blah, blah, blah. But instead, go do the opposite. Go do something kind for yourself. Go bring yourself a cool beverage. Sit down at the table to eat something nice. That's something that I still have to work through, of like when I'm stressed or overwhelmed or I'm feeling emotionally zapped, like what can I do to practice that self-care to remind myself that I'm still worthy and deserving of love and care and respect. And so that's what I would suggest for our listener, as well as all of our listeners, when we have those bad, nasty feelings that we tend to make bad and nasty about ourselves, what can we do that would be the opposite?
I love that. It's almost like when you see a skinned knee, you bandage the knee. You see a hurt heart, you move forward, you do some healing to that. I love that. That's a great suggestion.
What did you think of today's segment? And is it something you would like to hear more from us? Or do you have a situation you'd like to get our advice on? You can let us know by emailing us at hello@breakingfreewithkerrytara.com. If you haven't yet, make sure you follow or subscribe, write us a review, and if you know someone who would benefit from this episode, make sure to share it with them. If you're not following us on social media yet, you can check me out at tara.relationshipcoach and Kerry at Kerry McAvoy PhD, and we'll see you back here next time.